How to interpret Vladivostok as a cross-border transshipment port for China's domestic trade. Vladivostok is a city in the far east of Russia, but it also has a name called Vladivostok, which was once a territory of China in history. In recent years, with the development of Sino-Russian relations, Russia has opened the port of Vladivostok to China as a transshipment port for cross-border transportation of Chinese domestic trade goods. To put it simply, Chinese enterprises can transport goods to other domestic ports through Vladivostok port in the future. This is good news for the Northeast region. You must know that Jilin and Heilongjiang provinces have no access to the people of the Northeast have waited 163 years for this moment. According to the announcement on the website of the General Administration of Customs of China, the General Administration of Customs recently approved the addition of Vladivostok Port in Jilin Province as a transit port for cross-border transportation of domestic trade goods, and the addition of Zhoushan Container Terminal in Zhejiang Province and Jiaxingzhou Port. It is the port of entry for cross-border transportation of domestic trade goods. Announcement of the General Administration of Customs of China. Vladivostok, formerly known as Vladivostok, is located in the northeast of the Eurasian continent. In the late Qing dynasty, the Qing government and Tsarist Russia signed a series of unequal treaties such as the Aegon Treaty and the Sino-Russian Treaty of Beijing, ceding 1.1 million square kilometers of land to Tsarist Russia, including Vladivostok. Today, Tsarist Russia has become history, and Vladivostok is an important city in the Russian Far East and the headquarters of the Russian Pacific Fleet. Vladivostok port is the largest port in the Russian Far East, with an annual throughput of about 10 million tons. It should be noted that as early as 2004, China and Russia completed the border demarcation, determined the border line of more than 4,300 kilometers between China and Russia, and established boundary markers. Therefore, there is no territorial dispute between China and Russia, and there is no territorial dispute. Vladivostok Port. At present, it is very important for China-Russia relations to maintain stable development because China and Russia are facing common challenges. The threat to China is no longer Tsarist Russia, but the containment and suppression of China by the United States and other Western countries. This is also a problem facing Russia. After the end of the Cold War, the NATO group led by the United States aimed its spearhead at Russia and continued to expand its power. In recent years, NATO power has approached Russia's doorstep, and finally triggered the Russia-Ukraine conflict last year. After the Russian-Ukraine conflict broke out, NATO did not stop expanding, but strengthened relations with Indo-Pacific countries such as Japan and South Korea, and began to contain China. In the face of a huge military group like NATO, it is no longer realistic to fight alone. China and Russia can only strengthen cooperation. NATO. In recent years, China and Russia have held a number of joint military exercises, and both sides have sent elite troops to participate, exchange and share experience, so as to achieve complementarity. In addition, the China-Russia exercise also shares a communication command system, reflecting the high degree of mutual trust between China and Russia. At the same time, China and Russia are also strengthening economic cooperation. Russia has rich oil and gas resources. China and Russia are planning a new gas pipeline. It starts from the Belarusian region of Russia, passes through the Ushuri River, and ends at the Hulin starting point in China. Finish. Russian Presidential Press Secretary Dmitry Peskov said recently that China and Russia have a relationship of mutual benefit, and no one depends on the other. So now that Russia is opening the port of Vladivostok to China, it is actually a good thing for both parties. Russian President's Press Secretary Peskov. The northeast of my country really needs an outlet to the sea. The northeast is rich in products and fertile fields. It is an important grain production area and commodity grain base in my country. The Daking oil field in Heilongjiang has maintained high and stable production for more than 40 years and is the largest oil field in my country. In addition, the northeast region also provides a huge supply of timber to our country. It can be said that the northeast region is not short of resources, but since the reform and opening up, the development of the northeast region has slowed down, and the proportion of the economy in the whole country has declined. There are many factors involved in this, but the transportation factor cannot be ignored. In today's world, bulk commodities such as grain and oil are generally transported by water or sea. Sea transport has a large volume and cheap freight, but Jilin and Heilongjiang are far away from the sea. Vladivostok. In the past, the two provinces of Jilin and Heilongjiang were transported by sea, and the goods could only be transported to Dalian port first, and then transferred by sea. The journey is long, from Jixi City, Heilongjiang Province to Dalian Port, a full 1,000 kilometers, and Jixi City is only 200 kilometers away from the nearest coast in Russia. If the northeast region can use the Vladivostok port to transport goods, both the transportation time and the freight rate will be greatly reduced, which will help transform the resources of the northeast region into wealth and realize the strategy of revitalizing the northeast. At the same time, China can also drive the local development of Vladivostok, and even affect the entire far east of Russia. If Vladivostok can be developed well, not only will it not become an obstacle to the development of Sino-Russian relations, but it will also benefit the two peoples. The Chinese government recently announced that the port of Vladivostok, Russia, will be added as a transit port for cross-border transportation of domestic trade goods. Chinese media said that this will greatly facilitate the transportation of goods in Jilin and Heilongjiang. Today's Vladivostok is what once was Vladivostok. Some netizens said, after a lapse of 163 years, the Chinese regained possession of this important seaport. Vladivostok is Russia's largest port city on the Pacific coast and the offshore transportation center in the Russian Far East. Vladivostok is Russia's largest port city on the Pacific coast and the offshore transportation center in the Russian Far East. Deutsche Welle Chinese website, the official website of the General Administration of Customs of China, issued an announcement on May 4, stating that in order to implement the country's strategic deployment of revitalizing the old industrial base in northeast China and promote the use of overseas ports to carry out cross-border transportation of domestic trade goods, the General Administration of Customs decided to further expand the business scope of cross-border transportation of domestic trade goods in Jilin Province, agreed to increase the port of Vladivostok, Russia, as the cross-border transportation of domestic trade goods on the basis of the original business scope of cross-border transportation of domestic trade goods in Jilin Province or transit ports, two ports, Zhoushan Yangzhou Container Terminal and Jiaxingzipu Port in Zhejiang Province, will be added as entry ports for cross-border transportation of domestic trade goods. This announcement will be implemented from June 1, 2023. According to public information, cross-border transportation of domestic trade goods refers to the business of domestic trade goods departing from a port in China and transporting them overseas to another port in China. The announcement of the General Administration of Customs that Russia's port of Vladivostok has become a transshipment port for domestic trade and cross-border transportation has attracted public attention. A public account posted a question asking, Russia's port of Vladivostok has become an outlet for northeast China, the former land of China. Vladivostok, Russia, formerly known as Vladivostok, was Chinese territory during the Qing dynasty and the previous Yuan and Ming dynasties. In the Sino-Russian Beijing Treaty in 1860, the Qing dynasty ceded the area east of the Ushiri River, including Vladivostok, to the Russian Empire, and the Russian Empire named it Vladivostok, which means conquest of the east in Russian. Today, Vladivostok is the largest port city on the Pacific coast of Russia and the offshore transportation center in the Russian Far East. It is also Russia's largest city, economic and cultural center in the Far East, and the headquarters of the Russian Pacific Fleet. The picture shows Chinese leader Xi Jinping attending the 4th Eastern Economic Forum in Vladivostok in September 2018 at the invitation of Russian President Putin. The picture shows Chinese leader Xi Jinping attending the 4th Eastern Economic Forum in Vladivostok in September 2018 at the invitation of Russian President Putin. Let Jilin's land transportation distance to the sea be greatly shortened. The Chinese media Caixin issued an article on May 13 saying, Jilin and Heilongjiang provinces do not have access to the sea. For a long time, they have been transiting sea freight through the port of Dalian, Liaoning. After obtaining the access to the sea through the Russian Far East port, the land transportation distance will be greatly shortened. Land transportation from Jilin and Heilongjiang to Liaoning ports generally exceeds 1,000 kilometers, while Swivenhe and Hunchun to Vladivostok, Russia are only about 200 kilometers, and the cost of land transportation can be greatly reduced. The Caixin report pointed out that since 2022, the trade volume between China and Russia has increased significantly, the capacity of container ships from ports in southeast China to the port of Vladivostok has increased, and the ability of ships to carry cargo on the return journey has increased. Under this opportunity, in September 2022, the Jilin Hunchun Municipal Navigation Bureau applied for adding Vladivostok as a transit port for cross-border transportation of domestic trade goods, and adding two ports in Liaoning as ports of entry for cross-border transportation of domestic trade goods. The report quoted a senior freight forwarder in Shanghai as saying that the goods from Jilin and Heilongjiang are transported southward through overseas ports, which not only reduces the cost, but also helps China to strengthen the closeness of the industrial chain and supply chain with its neighbors. However, in the short term, the internal contradiction is that the major ports for China to transport goods to Russia have been congested for a long time due to the surge in cargo volume, and it is not easy to transport goods to Vladivostok despite the short distance. The Customs Release WeChat public account released a message. On May 15, the head of the Port Supervision Department of the General Administration of Customs answered reporters' questions about the Northeast region's international trade transit business through the ports of neighboring countries, saying that this is a mutually beneficial cooperation between relevant countries. Winning cooperation model. Pancakes, caviar, and vodka. New breakthrough in Sino-Russian economic and trade cooperation. The Chinese official media Global Times also paid attention to this topic on May 16, and quoted Chinese experts as saying, "This is another new breakthrough in Sino-Russian economic and trade cooperation under the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and it is also a new breakthrough in Sino-Russian local cooperation." New breakthrough. The report also pointed out that from January to April this year, the Sino-Russian trade volume increased by more than 41%, exceeding $73 billion. China supplies Russia with electronics, equipment, household appliances, automobiles, and other consumer goods. Russia sells oil, natural gas, food, metal, wood, and chemical products in large quantities to China. Some netizens also called it a significant benefit and imagined that China could return to Vladivostok. As a netizen wrote, "Recently there is a major good news. Russia agreed to provide Vladivostok, to China for transit, which means that after 163 years, the Chinese regained ownership. This is an important estuary." This netizen said that an important reason why the Northeast's economy has not been good in recent years is that the Northeast does not have a real estuary to the sea. Embarrassing situation. German media, Russia has always been wary of China in the Far East. The German media Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung pointed out in its report on May 15 that in Russia, people are traditionally wary of the expansion of power in the Far East. The report stated that the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs has confirmed the Chinese announcement, but at present it is only confirmed by its representatives in Vladivostok, and the latter only quoted the corresponding Chinese information on its Telegram channel. The Russian Far East customs officials said on May 15 that they would deal with a possible increase in cargo movement. The Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung reported that Russia has always been uneasy about China's expansion of power in the Far East, but in recent years, at least since 2014, it has not publicly expressed this. After launching a war of aggression in Ukraine, Moscow's dependence on Beijing has increased again. This report also mentioned the new Chinese official map specification at the beginning of this year. China's Ministry of Natural Resources ordered in February that in Chinese maps, 8 Russian place names should be marked with historical Chinese names in brackets, Vladivostok to enclose Vladivostok. Recently, the General Administration of Customs of China agreed to add the Russian port of Vladivostok Port, as a transit port for cross-border transportation of domestic goods on the basis of the original business scope of cross-border transportation of domestic goods in Jilin province. Public opinion at home and abroad and interpretation from different standpoints. This is of course good news. Whether it is for the development of China, Russia, or East Asia, it is a matter of addition. It has been endowed with a lot of associated imaginations, but at the same time it has also attracted some misunderstandings and distortions. Heilongjiang and Jilin provinces have no ports to the sea, and have been transshipping sea freight from Dalian port in Liaoning for a long time. If they transship in Vladivostok port in the future, the land transportation distance of more than hundreds of kilometers can be shortened, and the cost will be greatly reduced. For Vladivostok and the wider Russian Far East, a deeper connection with Northeast China will surely bring more development opportunities. These are all relatively certain and worthy of the expectations of both China and Russia. However, things are not that simple. According to media reports, this means that Russia has reopened the port of Vladivostok to China after 163 years. This naturally aroused the historical memories and emotions of many Chinese netizens. Some foreign media took the opportunity to make the argument that Russia may be becoming a vassal of China in order to stir up real concerns about China in Russian society and add material to their special version of China threat theory customized for Russia. This is against Russia. Deliberate belittling and malicious provocation of the new model of major country relationship between China and Russia. Vladivostok port participates in the transit of China's domestic trade. We don't need to overinterpret this, and let it run overloaded with unnecessary connotations. Vladivostok is not the only one that regards foreign ports as my country's domestic trade transit ports. As early as 2007, it participated in the pilot operation of China's cross-border transportation of domestic trade goods together with Dongfang Port and Nakotka Port. Tianjin Port is a Rivino port for domestic trade transfer. Now, with the steady progress of the relationship between the two countries, especially in the joint statement of the leaders of the two countries in March this year, they emphasized the vigorous development of the interconnected logistics system, and it is natural for Vladivostok Port, the largest port in the Russian Far East, to play a greater role. The participation of Vladivostok Port in China's trade system is a microcosm of the continuous advancement of China-Russia border trade cooperation over the years, which is particularly enlightening in the current international environment. Containers carrying goods shuttle back and forth on the long border between China and Russia every day, as well as tourists from the two countries going to each other. This is a truly beautiful landscape. We all know that the borders of many countries have been heavily guarded for a long time, with tense confrontations and even wars. In contrast, the vitality and peace displayed on the Russian border is even more precious. Some American and Western public opinion now sees Sino-Russian cooperation and reflexively associates it with the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. In fact, since the beginning of the century, the rapid development of the Asia-Pacific economy has led Russia to focus on promoting a new round of Far East development strategy. In the final analysis, the great potential of the Far East comes from its being part of the highland of cooperation in the Asia-Pacific region. Letting the Far East keep up with the trend and pace of cooperation and development in the Asia-Pacific region is a move in keeping with the times. In recent years, the economic development of the Far East has accelerated and new progress has been made in the construction of free ports, making it expected to become the next highland for cooperation. This also shows that the commercial cooperation between China and Russia in the Far East not only reflects the mutual trust and friendship between the two countries, but also follows the laws of the market. It should also be noted that the cooperation between China and Russia in the Far East is still underestimated, and a huge potential has yet to be released. Among them, some specific blocking points in the border trade cooperation between the two countries need to be further cleared up, such as the low efficiency of customs clearance on the Russian side and the inadequate implementation of the Far East development policy, etc., which have interfered with the investment willingness of Chinese companies to a certain extent in the past. We hope that as Russia makes greater efforts to promote the development strategy of the Far East in the future, it will promote more vigorous development of the border trade between the two countries. The comprehensive strategic cooperative partnership between China and Russia in the new era needs to be reflected in the success of specific cooperation projects in the end. If China and Russia can work together to turn the eastern end of the Eurasian continent into a huge market and source of energy resource supply and output, it will not only benefit the two countries and their peoples, but also benefit the supply chain stability and economic development of the entire Asia-Pacific and the world, will be a positive asset. Doing this well is another contribution of the new model of major country relationship between China and Russia to the world.